Good afternoon. My name is Tammy from HITCH, and thank you for being here today. Thank you all for being here. So I'll just start with an introduction. So today's webinar is actually a part of the Digital Education Specialist Webinar Series hosted by HITCH. And HITCH is an educational video platform for applied learning opportunities. Today's webinar, we're hosting it in collaboration with TechQuest. And just to give you a slight overview of how we'll be going today, we'll start with introductions as we've done, and then we'll have a brief speech or talk from a teacher, a fellow teacher in the TechQuest community. Please let me know if you're on the call, Adilan, or in the chat. Thank you. And then we'll proceed to the meat of today's session, which is how to develop engaging digital educational resources, led by HITCH content lead and Chief Business Development Officer, Zach Burns. Zach, can you please give us an introduction, a brief intro? Thank you.
About that. Hello, everyone. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. As Temi had mentioned, my name is Zach Burns. So I am the head of content and business development for HITCH. Generally speaking, I'm staying in Lekki phase 1, but because of COVID-19, I've been back in Canada now, but I'm really excited to get to talk to you all today. And looking forward to do the question and answer section at the end. So please, by all means, get some stuff prepared, and I look forward to talking with you all.
It looks like we're waiting on Adela. No, I'm not sure if he's not here. We can actually just proceed with you, Zach.
I'm going to go ahead and I will start my presentation here. So just to give a little context before we jump in immediately, the reason or the inspiration for a lot of this series has come obviously at the beginning of COVID-19 and last March, or actually March 2020 rather. There was a whole lot of disarray that especially left teachers, we felt, very isolated and with very little direction as far as how to approach maintaining communication with their students, how to develop educational resources that allowed their students to continue learning. And then there was very little direction coming, or even sometimes contradicting direction coming from school boards versus the NERDC or national government from Nigeria, as well as plenty of other actors in the space. So you had a number of NGOs working for different solutions. And what we had realized is that it really had left teachers kind of passionate teachers who really wanted to work and continue to work with their students were kind of left in this situation where they're being thrown into a whole bunch of new platforms. Many didn't have the skills or hadn't previously created any educational content. And so what we really wanted to do was to be able to share some of the lessons that we have learned over the years when it comes to creating content. And in particular, the very first question that I'll cover on this is when to create content versus when to curate content. So this seems like a very basic question to ask oneself, but it seems to be lost in the weeds quite a bit. So with that in mind here, I'm going to actually share my screen. In today's presentation, as I was mentioning, we are going to be handling content curation. And now, just to give, again, a little bit of background, content curation as opposed to content development or content production. Content curation refers to when you're using existing content and aligning it to meet whatever your needs are. So as a teacher, whether this be fitting it to a lesson plan, whether it be, of course, creating content for the learning objectives. But the fact of the matter is, when COVID-19 had hit, a lot of teachers and a lot of schools and a lot of companies, in fact, felt that their only strategy was to go ahead and start creating this content themselves. So the very first point that we really wanted to get across is the fact that there is a plethora of very high quality, world-class educational videos that already exist on the internet. Now, there are certain classes and subjects and themes where it doesn't make sense to use existing videos. For instance, if you're talking about basic or civic education, a video that's made in the United States or made in Europe or even made in Tanzania, for instance, may not meet exactly what's being taught in civic education. So when you get to those certain points where there just isn't the content out there, at that point in time is when you should begin evaluating, should I create this piece of content? And now what should this piece of content look like? So to go through this entire presentation here, we're going to start off with curation, as we believe it is the first level that you should be going for when you're looking to engage with digital educational resources. See what's already out there. If you're a maths teacher teaching basic math and you're covering a subject on surds, there are a number of wonderful educational videos out there that will focus on things like surds or logarithms. And this isn't quite as impacted because it's a STEM subject. This doesn't get quite as impacted by where it's produced. So for instance, Khan Academy is one of our partners that we use their content very often, and they have wonderful content for the maths and sciences that doesn't necessarily need to have that contextual touch. So in the very beginning, I'm just going to go through this proprietary system that we've developed, or that I use to evaluate existing content. So that'll be the first stage. The next one is going to be focusing on content design. So when you're talking about creating educational videos, there's a lot of misconception about what makes a good e-learning resource or an educational video. Many people have this belief that you can just stand in front of a camera, you can stand in front of a whiteboard, and you can give your lesson just like you would in the classroom, just doing it recorded, and now you've created some e-learning content. The fact of the matter is that's actually not how we define e-learning content. And so we'll get into what are some of the rules, some of the base theoretical rules to follow based on learning sciences. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about content production. And just to give an outline of, if you wanted to get started in content production, where to begin and where to place your focus. So let me see here, make sure this is going. There we go. So when we start with content curation, the very first thing, again, you need to always ask yourself is, do I need to develop this content? Does this content already exist? And if the content already exists, does it match my specific needs? So the specific learning outcomes or the specific context in which it's being used. Now, the other question is an interesting one and a little bit more subjective, but I think is a very important for people to evaluate. It's a little bit more focused on self-reflection, and that is, should I create this video? Should I create this piece of content? In many cases, unfortunately, what happens with educational resource production is that people that may not be well versed in the subject matter themselves will go and create content that could actually be incorrect or inaccurate information. And now at that point in time, you've actually stirred up a whole nother issue, as we're seeing in the world today, in the world of misinformation. So always make sure to do a little bit of self-evaluation. Sometimes all that it will take is for you to go and do some research yourself, refresh yourself with the content, read a textbook, whatever the case may be, but just make sure that you are prepared and you understand the content before you even start to think about creating your own content. And then the final question you should be asking yourself is this subject matter well suited for video? The fact of the matter is there is certain content, certain subjects, certain learning outcomes, which video just isn't the appropriate medium to use. So, one perfect example of that is when you're discussing anything having to do with, I don't know, home economics or anything up or chemistry related. When you're talking about experiments, perhaps the best thing to do is not to create a particular piece of video for this, just because it's something that will actually lose value as students aren't able to fully engage with it in the way that it's intended. So that's the very first part of content curation. Now, there's kind of a lot to evaluate. If you were to search surds on YouTube, for instance, and I'm just sticking with the basic maths content here, just as an example, but if you were to search surds on YouTube, what you'd find is you'd get over 2.2 million results. So now as a teacher, the next step you have to do is you have to go through all of this existing content, and you have to figure out if it matches the individual learning outcomes. Does it match what you need? And so for that, we've developed a system here that I like to just call the 4 A's of content curation. And now you can look at this, as is shown on the screen here, as existing in a pyramid. What is the key element that you should be looking for in a video? Where should your eyes and ears be paying attention to when you're evaluating any content that's already been created? The very first piece that you have to do is you have to have your underlying input. So in this case, we actually have developed a tool that allows us to take the NERDC curriculum, break it down by the subject, theme, topic, the performance objectives, the content, the teacher activities, and the learning outcomes, as well as student activities. Now, I know many of you are probably familiar with this. This is printed in textbooks. Some of you have hard copies of this, but being able to have this digitally as you're going about your content curation is very useful. Now, each of these different categories is treated differently for a different perspective on content curation. So at the base of the pyramid, and the most important component is accuracy. And this is what I'm saying, is the content that's being shared accurate and correct? Does it align with the individual learning outcomes? And so for those, when we're talking about accuracy, we're focusing on the performance objections and the evaluation guide. Does it actually meet the performance objectives that are prescribed? And does it cover, at the end of the day, what the student should learn through the evaluation guide? So you always start with accuracy. Without accuracy, the video is completely useless, or the educational resource is useless. The next one is ability. Now, when we're talking about ability, we're actually talking about the student's ability. If you have a student who's learning something about logarithms in, let's just say, grade 8, and then you have an SS3, or sorry, grade 8, JSS3, and then you have an SS3 student who's also learning about logarithms, the level in which they're engaging with this content is going to be completely different. Therefore, you always must assess the ability of the student when evaluating any existing content. So for this, the indicators directly in the curriculum are going to be the grade. And again, it's going to be the evaluation guide. The evaluation guide should really target on exactly what the student should be able to answer when they complete the content or complete the lesson. Now, the next one up the pyramid is accessibility. Now, with accessibility, this is where we get to more of the fine-tuning stages. So as I had mentioned previously, when you're dealing with something like civic education, which has a very contextual subject base, you need to make sure that what's being presented in the video is reflecting what the students are familiar with. So now, I had mentioned Khan Academy is great. It's great because they have math, which can be a very universal language to a certain extent. However, when examples are being provided, for instance, in a Khan Academy video, if they're talking about purchasing apples with dollar bills and 50 cents and quarters, the fact of the matter is students are not able to connect with that specific example that's being given. So you should then look for these videos that do match the contextual surroundings, or what's considered the indigenous knowledge base of the students. And so that's accessibility. And for that, we really focus on the content section. So these would really highlight what the student is going to be familiar with given this topic. And then the very, very creme de la creme of any educational piece of content is the appeal. Appeal realistically does not carry as much weight as some of these other ones, because at the end of the day, if you have a lack or less appealing, but incredibly accessible, incredibly accurate video, chances are the student will be able to learn from that video, even lacking the appeal. That being said, engagement is an important element to any educational resource. Therefore, appeal should be taken in mind. If you can take a piece of content that has a higher audience appeal, then you should still take it, as long as the remaining pieces on that pyramid are all being met. Now, just to give you an idea here when talking about appeal, there are really three main types of educational videos that are created. The first one on the left-hand side of the screen here is the screen recorder style video. So this is what Khan Academy is famous for. These videos are great in the sense that they provide you with the key information and allow teachers, or allow the mentor or narrator, to walk you through each of the steps as students follow along. So for the science area subjects, STEM subjects, this is fantastic. It works very well to be able to demonstrate models. This is a physics video that's demonstrating inertia in this current screenshot there. However, there are certain times where this just isn't engaging. If you're talking about primary level students, maybe you want something that's going to have a little bit more animation, something that's going to have a little bit more energy. So at that point in time, we have the middle type of video, which is a presenter style, usually with a green screen behind them. This allows for animation. It allows for an actor, in the front, this gentleman in the front here. It allows for singing. It allows for far more activity and engagement components. But as we get to it in the later parts of this presentation, you'll see that actually comes with some sacrifices when it comes to the learning science of videos. Now, the very final style here, talking about appeal, is the fully animated content. Now, when you're talking about the sciences, a lot of the time, this can be a great resource to use, because if you're talking about anything like, for instance, in this photo that's included here, the solar system, Having a video that's fully animated that allows to bring that concept to life and demonstrate it in real time is just such a great tool to have. And animated videos, while many people think of them as being geared towards the primary level, the fact of the matter is JS, SS, it's incredibly useful to use animated content. Everybody can engage with it because it really allows you to get a full in-depth photo or picture in your mind about what's going on in the concepts being discussed. Okay. Now, we understand that when you're going through this process, that it's actually incredibly difficult to not only hop on YouTube, use the data to do it, spend all this time. As I said, there can be over 2 million views that come up, or 2 million results that come up for any given YouTube search on a certain subject area. So that's why at HITCH, we're developing our content curation and HITCH lesson planning tool. The way that this lesson planner tool will work is that you can have this actually directly in your Google Chrome or have it on whichever web browser you use. And basically, as you're going through, any teacher that has gone ahead prior to you and has curated some resources for the internet to the section that you yourself are working on, for instance, general mathematics themed to basic operations, addition and subtraction, you can see content that other teachers have curated to this section. So it's already narrowing down the content that's available for you. And then all you need to do is do a quick click and it'll move it directly into a lesson plan for you, allowing it to organize nice and easy for your students and be able to either use that in class if schools are open and you have those capabilities, or to be able to assign these to students so that at home, students can engage with these videos, which are all made available offline on the HITCH platform. Now, we're going to jump into now really the meat of this presentation, which is educational video content design. And in particular, sorry. Are you able to hear me? Sorry, I just got a message that some people are struggling.
You're audible.
I'm audible? Okay, great. Thank you, sir. So in regards to educational video content design, what I had mentioned previously is this idea that a lot of schools, this goes all the way from tertiary schools down to primary level schools, a lot of teachers wanted to engage, and I very much commend the effort to figure out any way to continue engaging with your students, especially at the beginning of the COVID lockdown. But what was occurring is many thought, as I mentioned previously, in educational video, all you needed to do is to be standing in front of a chalkboard or a whiteboard, write your lesson, speak to it, have the camera maybe panning to some of the stuff on the whiteboard, and you're good to go. But the fact of the matter is, you're actually detracting value from that lesson by doing it that way. When you're in the classroom and the teacher is talking to you in front of a chalkboard, in front of a whiteboard, what makes it so effective is that you have the ability to interact with that teacher. You can ask them to further explain anything that they're going over. But now when you just film a video standing in front of a blackboard, you've eliminated that interaction. And so at this point in time, you've actually taken value away from what that original lecture was. Now, when you're creating educational video for that reason, there should always be a value add. That should be the idea of how you define e-learning content. So for instance, in this video that I have to the right, if this gentleman were just standing in front of a blackboard, maybe trying to draw some diagrams on the nitrogen cycle, it would not be captured in the same way that this video demonstrates specifically how the soil interacts, has the representation of the flowers or the plants rather, goes into their root systems. You can just tell from looking at this video that this has a value add. It gives another visual cue for the student on how to go ahead and handle this. Sorry, I do see chats coming through. Yes. Okay, no problem. I can definitely slow down a bit here. Sorry, just trying to be conscious of time. Okay, so again, when you're talking about e-learning content, it really does have to focus entirely on the value add. If you're going to create a piece of content that does not add value, again, you probably should go back to the design board and figure out a better way to do this. Now, more specifically into content design comes the principles of multimedia theory. So the principles of multimedia theory are the underlying academic research that has sought to explore how students and children can learn from multimedia resources. So the two main sources of information here come from Richard E. Mayer, who is a PhD in learning science. And he has written entire books about the principles of multimedia theory and design. And basically, he has done multiple cognitive studies to understand the ways in which the brain processes information, and then how to maximize that brain processing when you're using educational videos or multimedia content. Now, the other, and sorry, I apologize here. His book, his most famous book is Learning, second edition by Richard E. Mayer. So what he really talks about is the dual channel theory. So this is the meat and bones behind how our brains are able to process information and new information and knowledge. So the way you watch this diagram here is I want you to start over at the left-hand side and you make your way across. But you can think about this is there are really only two ways in which we can take in information. Take in academic information at the very least. Now, touch isn't included in this because it's considered a slightly different type of processing. However, for the most part, it's going to be listening to a lecture and being able to read or see pictures on a screen or a piece of resource. And so between these two ways are how the body takes in information. If they're spoken, they come in through your ears here. Now your ears and your brain are processing certain words. So it's really looking to focus on keywords and build a certain syntax in your brain. It's organizing those, that's getting the syntax here. And now you get the verbal model. So in your head, you're actually recreating what you're hearing. And I'm sure many of you understand, when you listen to something and you start picturing it and working it out in your head, this is exactly what's going on in your body here, or in your brain rather. And then the final part of it here is taking any prior knowledge. So if you have learned something new, but it's been tangentially related to something you've learned in the past, it allows you the final stage to take this prior knowledge, integrate it into your model that's going on in your brain, and then you get your knowledge storage here. Now, on the flip side, you also have the ability to do this with your eyes. So if you're reading words or looking at pictures, it goes ahead and it goes down to the eyes, which then focus on the image that it's familiar with, organizes those based on past experiences, develops a pictorial model, and then again goes to storage for the brain. Now, really the key thing to take away from this, we don't want to get too in-depth here, but the key thing to take away from this is that there are two main ways that your body processes information, and that is through your ears and through your eyes. So with this in mind, what Richard Mayer sought to do was to understand and master how to create the perfect educational video. And to do so, he came up with a number of principles, again, that are based on that exact theory that we were just looking over here, but to be drawn out and applied to educational or e-learning resources and educational videos in particular. So he has more than just the 5. He actually has 10 principles. However, we're just going to cover the main 5 here. The first one is coherence, which means extraneous words, sounds, and pictures are excluded. Signaling, key steps in narration are signaled. Redundancy is exactly what I am doing right now, which is words are presented as narration or text, but you should not just read exactly what is written. So I'm actually breaking my own rule. Spatial contiguity, words and images should be blended together. And temporal contiguity, everything should be explained in steps. Now, I know that's a little bit hard to kind of put to exactly what it means when it comes to an educational video, but so that's why I want to demonstrate here for you. So again, coherence principle is the removal of extraneous words, sounds, and pictures. So when you look at these two examples, and granted these are screenshots of videos, on the left-hand side, you have the Khan Academy, and on the right-hand side, you have another producer who does the animated style videos. Now, when you look at the one on the right, you may feel that this is actually, the slightly prettier image. There's not as much going on maybe, but in fact, there are components here. So the way that every picture, every arrow, every word on this screen on the left-hand side focuses only on the key processes and the key terms. Even what's going on down here, if you watch the video, is talking about the breakdown of detritus in the earth and how it then releases back into the air, the nitrogen cycle. Now on this one, it may look a little bit prettier. It may, for a younger student, be a little bit more engaging, but there are components involved in this that are just completely unnecessary and do not actually serve any purpose for what's meant to be covered, which is the nitrifying bacteria here. For instance, you don't really actually need to have these signs here, or these plants. You don't really need to have kind of this chart here. And so it actually introduces additional imagery that can take away from what the student is meant to be focusing on. So that is the coherence principle. Only present that information which is most important. Now, as we move forward here, the next one is signaling. So I'm using that exact same screenshot that we had just used from the other Khan Academy video. By the way, just as a reference, if you haven't noticed, Khan Academy is very good about utilizing this multimedia theory for their content. But they are not the only ones out there. There are a number of great producers out there aside from Khan Academy, Few School, a whole number of them. So just don't want you thinking Khan Academy is the only one because I'm using them as my example. But in principle 2, we're discussing signaling. Now I'm just going to go back here again. Signaling is that key steps in narration are signaled. So what's meant by that is if I were the teacher here and I was walking you through the nitrogen cycle, what I want to do is anytime I said, for instance, the ammonia, so we'll go here, the ammonia is absorbed by the plants and then broken down into amino acids. That exactly what I just did was I read something to you, and then through using these arrows and these arrows down here, there's actually a signaling that's going on. It's demonstrating to you the process that we're discussing. So as I read the cycle, these arrows demonstrate an exact process. Not only that, but as you come up here and, for instance, the blue circling to demonstrate what is ATP in this molecule, that's another example of signaling. It's drawing attention to whatever the topic is that you are discussing and making sure to denote what the key features are in the imagery you are seeing. So that's the second principle of signaling. Now, the third one is redundancy. So as I had mentioned before, what I was doing, having the text written on the screen and then reading verbatim, word for word, each piece of text that presented on the screen is redundancy. And this goes back to that dual channel theory. If our body is capable of taking in information through our eyes or our ears, but it struggles doing it at the exact same time, if it's the exact same content, you're actually getting redundancy. So if I were to sit here and write for you the nitrogen cycle, and I were to write it out word for word, everything I'm saying, so the nitrogen cycle begins with, and then honestly writing this all out as you're also watching it or hearing it on the screen, it does no good. You're better off speaking about something and demonstrating something different on the screen to support that, or alternatively demonstrating something on the screen and using the narration to actually just provide additional context or information. So that's the third principle of redundancy, pretty straightforward principle. Now the next ones are principles 4 and 5, which are spatial and temporal contiguity principles. Now these talk about how you present words and pictures and how you demonstrate sequencing. So when we're taking a look at this, and many of you would probably be familiar with this. I'm actually going to not talk about this image right here and go to something you're probably more familiar with. And this is in a textbook. There are often times where you'll have a diagram in a textbook where on the whole right-hand side of the page, maybe there's a diagram of the human body. And on the left-hand side of the page is where it's talking about maybe what's going on in the human body. And so it'll talk about the lungs. And then in the paragraph, it'll say, see point B on the diagram on the next page to get an idea of where the lungs are. And this is a very common thing that's done. This is actually terrible for knowledge retention. You want the images and the words that you're discussing to be as close to each other as humanly possible. So for instance, if I'm talking about ammonia, I should have ammonia, a picture of ammonia right here. If I'm talking about bacteria, I have the picture of bacteria right here. And so what that does is it allows your brain to now make a connection between the images and the words that you're reading. So that's the spatial contiguity principle. Now, from a temporal contiguity principle, this seems very logical, but you have to explain things in steps, and you have to demonstrate or signal what those steps are. So again, we're talking about something with the cycle. So the arrows are the perfect way to demonstrate sequence. But anytime you're talking about math operations, maybe you finish one part of a math operation and now you need to draw an arrow to show we're taking the answer from this part and plugging it into this equation. You know, x equals 7, and now you do an arrow pointing to the original equation where you substitute x or 7 for x. This is considered the temporal contiguity principle. So now, as I said, there are about 5 more principles that Richard Mayer covers. They get very detailed, very specific, but the reason I'm not going to continue going through those, along with how specific they get, is actually, if one were to follow these principles to the T, they would almost always produce a Khan Academy style video. But the fact of the matter is, there are times where you have to actually break these principles for the benefit of your intended user. So I don't know if there's any primary school teachers, but even JS and SS students would struggle constantly watching Khan Academy style videos. They're dry, incredibly informative, but dry, a little bit boring. If you put a primary age student in front of this, the chances are they are not going to absorb any knowledge just because they're just too bored with it and can't be bothered to follow along with it. So that's why there is a gentleman by the name of Derek Muller who runs a channel called Veritasium, excuse me. And what he did was he wrote his PhD on now taking this cognitive theory that Richard Mayer, all of these principles, and now talking about how you actually apply these. In other words, if you lived in this entire vacuum, academic vacuum, and you're just doing purely research, of course, you can do these cognitive style videos that Richard Mayer had prescribed. But in the real world, when you have certain audiences that you have to take into consideration and you have to apply these theories to the real context that students are watching them in, you're going to naturally have to break some of these principles. The other component that Derek Muller talks about is the interactivity. So I had mentioned when you're in class, you get the ability to discuss with your teacher, ask questions to your teacher, get further information, look at books, whatever the case may be. And what Derek Muller states is if you follow Rich Mayer's principles of multimedia learning explicitly, you will not have any of that interactivity. There will be nothing that allows a student to ask a question or otherwise. Instead, he says what you should do is put those questions directly in your video. If you have a pause and you make, even though it's a one-sided video, you are just speaking to the video. If you took a pause and you said, hey kids, so if it takes 20 minutes to get halfway across town, how long do you think it would take to get halfway across town and back? And just posing that question with a break after it actually engages the student. Their brain was shown to respond to that question and is already thinking about the answer. So he says there's an important component of interactivity that needs to be included in the content. Now, finally, as you go through this, the other portion that you'll see is that, for instance, if you're using a primary school student and you're showing them a Khan Academy video, such as the one shown with the place values here, the fact of the matter is they're just not going to be that engaged. So it actually helps to break that first principle of coherence and bring some additional flair, bring some additional images, and bring some additional energy to the video. Even though it's not helping to reinforce the lesson, it's engaging the student, which is very, very important. And now a final time you may break any of these coherence or these principles is when you're dealing with accessibility. So we talk about in the normally functioning brain, you have the eyes and the ears to process your information. But if you have a deaf student or if you have a blind student, then of course the whole entire experience gets changed. And you'll need to make sure that your content is reflecting that student's needs, whether that be a deaf student getting subtitles added to their content, or whether it be using larger text. Whatever the case may be, there are numbers of different ways that you can go ahead and enjoy that or get that added level of accessibility, excuse me. Okay, so Very final thing now here at a very high level is now we've gone over this, you understand, hopefully you understand that your first approach should be to look for existing content, using those A's to evaluate that content, make sure it meets your needs. The next step would be, nope, the content there does not meet my needs. I want to create my own content. So then you should be going to the design stages where you're looking at these principles. You should be writing your scripts. You should be thinking about how you want to present this information. And then the final thing is to get into the actual content production. So interestingly enough, everyone talks about content production, but the fact of the matter is most of content production happens in pre-production. So the number one thing I can say, the reason why the bulk of this presentation is focused on the design and development portions is because planning your video is the best and easiest way to guarantee good content. Make sure you're basing it on a solid input. So whether that be a lesson plan that you yourself have developed, whether that be the curriculum, as I showed before, kind of the learning outcomes, whether it be a textbook. So at this point, one of the things HITCH is doing is we're actually integrating our video library into enhanced e-textbooks so that students can have those videos directly next to what they're reading, which again reinforces these. Write a script and write multiple scripts. I would tell you, we rewrite scripts regularly. You will have to write and storyboard. What I personally suggest is you have one person storyboarding, one person writing a script, and then you try to make sure the two line up. And then that gets you kind of the collaboration to make sure one person's handling the visual element while one person is handling the audio element. And then making sure those two align and match those principles that were discussed. Now, in that is also being able to identify if you will break a principle. Now, resources needed. A lot of people think you need all of these, high quality cameras and microphones and a studio to film in. But the fact of the matter is you actually do not. The most important equipment is lighting. But if you happen to be in a region that gets a lot of sunlight, you can actually film outdoors and using the natural sunlight. Or you can buy some relatively inexpensive stage lights to be able to light up your space. But lighting is a very key factor in just the overall quality of a video. Now, audio equipment is going to be your next most important. So right now, what we're talking about is the lighting. So that's really engaging the eyes, and then the audio equipment, because being able to clearly and succinctly hear what the teacher is presenting is going to be the next way the student takes in the information. So if there was any place that you should make an investment in video production, most people would think it's the camera. It is the speakers and the lighting. Make sure the microphone rather and the lighting. These are some of the key components. Now, one of the things we've done, we've converted garages into studios for part-time. So it doesn't need to, as long as no diesel generators are running in the back and you don't have any of that noise, you can turn an empty space into your house into a studio quite easily. Now, when it comes to actually filming and recording, having a director is very key. Even if you're doing screen recorder style videos, you still need someone who's really controlling the flow and understands what the end outcome is going to be. And then there are certain programs like Camtasia you can use for screen recording. It's a very good intro level program that allows you to get really kind of the basics of the screen recording, and it has free trial versions. And then finally is post-production. So the number one thing that I can tell people is upload your content as soon as you have it filmed. Upload it to a cloud, upload it to YouTube, even if you're not planning on releasing it on YouTube, upload it to a USB stick. People lose their content all the time. This, especially I've noticed working with our Nigerian producers, all the time something happens, the network cuts out, electricity, you go off grid, something can happen, the mobile device dies, the network dies, something happens and you lose all of your content. So first and foremost, always upload and save your content externally as fast as possible. For video editing, again, I would go to Camtasia, or if you have the ability to have a Mac or you have the ability to spend a little bit on it, Final Cut Pro is going to be a really advanced video production software. So I just want to use this last opportunity here to say special thanks to TechQuest. It's wonderful being able to speak with the teachers and be able to work with you all. And then also I want to give a shout out to Amy Yogan, who is my teacher and mentor when it came to the learning sciences. She is the one who introduced me to Richard Mayer and Derek Muller. And so she has been an invaluable resource to me learning and being on this path of multimedia theory. And so wanted to give a special thanks here as well. So now again, the final thing, if you want to check out our online video application, you can go to app.hitch.video. And actually I can quickly give you a look at what that looks like. This is our online platform. As you can see here, you have different grades, JSSS, primary 1 through 6, all the way to SS3. When you select the grade, it allows you to go to the actual subjects, for instance, biology and SS3. And then you have taken directly from the curriculum, theme 1, topic 1, regulation of internal environment, or topic 2, nervous coordination. And then each of these videos, which can be made available offline for everybody, actually addresses an individual learning outcome as prescribed by the NERDC curriculum that we use. But as you can see, you can download the content and it is available.
In this video, I want to
all right, well, thank you all so much. I also encourage you all to join our Discord channel if you want to continue discussions or get information about upcoming webinar news. You can do that at www.hitch.video/discord. And for any of you interested in creating content yourself or wanting to ask any more questions, you can always reach out to me at zach@hitch.video, or again, feel free to reach out to me at hitch.video/discord. We are all on our Discord channel and we are constantly trying to interact with students as much as possible, or students rather, users as much as possible, and teachers. So thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, Dak. So now we'll take a few questions. Some of the questions, someone asked if the questions sent while registering will be answered. Yes. So Zach, I'm sending you the questions now. I sent you one, and just take a look at your chat. But yeah, so we'll answer questions now. Hope everything was concise and was easy to understand. I know it might take a bit to digest everything a bit. So we'll take some questions now, and then have Adelano from the TechQuest community join us. Yeah, so Zach, please proceed. If you can see those questions, let me know.
Okay, let's see. So I see one question.
So the first,
yeah, can
go ahead.
So
the first question, yes, no problem. So the first question we have is, where can we get educational resources that are beneficial for kids?
Okay, so there are a number of places that you can look for them. For educational videos, as I kind of demonstrated at the end of our platform, we do offer from primary 1 to SS3. It's free to use our online platform. You do not have to pay to sign up or to use it. You can download those videos at any point in time. And again, those have been optimized to last or to make best use of your data, and then can be viewed as many times as you would like offline. So for educational videos, I may be slightly biased, but we have put a lot of work into our educational video library. Now, if you wanted to go past the HITCH video library, the NERDC and the Nigerian curriculum have put together a number of resources, as has UNICEF. Or you can always just take the approach, YouTube Kids and YouTube Education is actually quite good as well. If you needed to find new content, they've released the new YouTube Kids, and it's quite a good platform. And then other than that, for anything like class notes, there are a bunch of different groups out there. But I do know, for instance, the Lagos State Ministry of Education is actually releasing class notes for free from their website as well. So those would be some of the places that I would start to look. But if you wanted to email me more specifically, feel free for a grade level, things like that. I'm always happy to answer a little bit further.
Great. So actually, the next question here, I might want to wait after Adelano speaks, because the question is, what advice will you give to teachers that like technology, but their employers don't care? So I don't know exactly you want to answer that question a bit, and then Adelano can chip in as well while he speaks.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear Adelano's response to that. It's a proposition that we have run into in the past, or a barrier we've run into in the past as well, where teachers are very excited to use the platform, but administrators just can't seem to get behind it. So I think the best way personally to handle that is there are a number of different channels that you can use to get your content and to get noticed out there. You know, we have one of our top educational video producers was a teacher for a long time. And then what she ran into this problem where she was creating educational videos specifically for WIAC exams and for the JAM exams. But her schools wouldn't even let her use them in the classroom. So what she did was she started a YouTube channel, and she went to her students and she directed as many of her students to her YouTube channel as she could. And she ended up leaving the school, and well, I guess now she's back to she's doing her video production, but she's also a guidance counselor. But that was kind of her approach, was, you know, find other channels. So at Hitch, we're always open to taking content and helping you to distribute and get recognized. So you always can feel free to share with us. But I think that's a very good question to ask Adelano, and I'd be interested to hear.
Thanks, Zach. Yes, I would ask the question again once Adelano is speaking. So we have something I think from Charlotte. Sorry. I may not understand, but maybe when I just read it out, you understand better. So it says, with the categories be editable. I think this is with regards to either the Hitch platform or maybe one of the other apps you mentioned. But it says she's asking if they're asking if the categories, yes, if she's talking about Hitch, or they're talking about Hitch, if the categories will be editable. Saying, I work in the UK, so the curriculum here is different. Would it be possible to add my own categories in to organize my resources?
So this is actually a wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking. This is one of the things we're actually working on right now. So in my presentation, I had showed the curation tool that we're building, or the lesson planning tool that we're currently building. A component of that I hadn't discussed is actually we've developed a machine learning backend, which will allow us to take any curriculum or scheme of work, so even just a syllabus for a class, we scan it in, and then you can select it, or you can scan it in and our ML will automatically handle it. And it will break that down for you so you can align your resources directly to whatever's in your current curriculum. At this point in time, it works in the way that you have kind of mentioned, where you can kind of denote your own categories, you can denote your own classes. You don't have to follow, the only restraint you would have right now is that it has to follow the hierarchy that we currently have. So that means you would still have to organize your content by subject or grade, subject, theme, topic. So as long as that still matches, which, you know, I know the IGCSE curriculum and the Cambridge curriculum do use very similar structure. So then yes, and you could go ahead and use it to align resources for that as well. And this is one of the things we're actually looking forward to doing. We do want to expand the curriculums that we can handle, and the British curriculum, or the IGCSE, is the next one for us.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Charlotte? Please let us know. But yes, thank you. She responded in the chat. Yes, thank you so much. So now we'll actually have Adelano Odunson. He's a teacher, an ICT teacher from Port Harcourt, who's a member of the Tech Quest community. I find it really interesting because I asked him to describe himself, and what he said is that he sees himself as a superhero. His superpower is teaching. He according to him, his life goal is to transfer everything he has learned and to get the younger generation to learn through every medium. So I think that's so beautiful. And please just unmute yourself, Adelano, because we can't hear you. Just go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Anywhere you're watching from. My name is Adelano from Port Harcourt. Thank you so much, Zach. That session, it's like I was talking to Timmy the other day. I told you, I said, education is is a birthing, as if you're giving birth to a new baby. It's exhilarating. So I'm supposed to talk on my experience with educational technology, tools, talking about Zoom, Google Classroom and all. And sincerely, I still say it, and I'm still going to say it over and over again. The best thing, one of the best things that happened to the human race is the internet. I'm telling you, I don't know how we would have actually coped with the new development that happened in 2020, the whole lockdown and everything, if there was no internet. I don't know how we would have been able to move through that phase and get to where we are right now. So it is important. It is important that we be abreast with the latest developments in the technological world and look for a way to actually coin it and merge it with our everyday life and everyday need. And now, talking about technology, I love a question somebody asked. Talking about what if you want to get involved in this kind of things, get your kids, because I believe every child I teach is my own child. So it sort of gives me this connection, this love for them. So if you want to actually do something for your own child, the child you give birth to, and some other person is telling you don't do it, and you know it's going to benefit your child, what would you do? You definitely look for a way around it, or just look away from what the person says and just go on with it. Talking about that, I remember why I used to teach Randolph full-time then, now part-time. I actually wanted to involve the kids in some level of social media interactions. We found out that there are kids in the school there who are on social media platforms and they do societally immoral things, record some disturbing videos and upload it. And when it came to knowledge, some teachers actually started castigating the kids, just saying bad words. And I stepped in, I said, no, it shouldn't be this way. The reason why they fell into this kind of delusion is because nobody got them through it. They just stumbled online one day and stumbled on one website and saw things and they just went with the flow. So I picked it up and I said, okay, I'm going to take it upon myself. And every child in that school, secondary school, that wants to open up a Facebook website, come to me, break time. Everybody was frowning at it, all the teachers, even my HOD, people were angry. But the kids still turned up and I opened a Facebook for them, every single one of them. But what I made sure I did is this. I taught them how to make passwords strong enough to prevent hacking or that thing. And I taught them, okay, this is what you would do online and could be dangerous to your privacy. It could be a danger to your everyday life. And sincerely, from that time till now, I've not gotten any complaint. They've been doing very well with their social media life because social media actually sort of gives people two lives. There's a life you live online and there's a life you actually live offline. And they've been able to merge that, their social media life, with this reality life. So that being said, now another thing is this. When the pandemic happened last year, or the outbreak came worldwide last year, and we were told, okay, you can't go to classes, you could not do. Everybody in my school, they were all panicking. The director, that's the owner of the school, the principal, everybody was in disarray. But I was calm because I actually had a foolproof plan. I knew I was going to be able to record something online. I'd be able to have a Zoom class with them, all of them in the houses. And I told the director, and the thing they kept telling me is data. Who would give you data? Who would? I said, okay, no problem. Take it out of my salary. If that is going to be the case, take the data stipends out of my salary. I'll do it. It's okay, what about the kids? I said, all we need to do is reach their parents. We have their numbers. But they still didn't let it go through. And there was nothing I could do other than going to the kids one after the other and telling them to tell their parents. Whoever's parent would agree, they came online. I gave them the Zoom link. They sent me a message on WhatsApp, sent the link to their parents, and then they watched from their houses. And the classes went on smoothly. So that made me understand one thing, which I feel every teacher should learn or should make their motto. Do not let obstacles stop you. Actually, obstacles, I don't see them as hindrance. I see them as a platform to climb to a higher level. That's what it should be. So the pandemic just helped us reach more people with limited time. And I was discussing something with Tammy, and I said something about the videos. Video recording, and God bless HITCH, sincerely. I went through the website and I could see the way everything is arranged, like down to the smallest category is just there. It is easy to sort out which video you want and when you want it. And it was sort of what I had as an idea before. And I found out that videos are actually more effective. Reason being, you're in a class and you're trying to explain something to the kids. They are distracted by themselves at times. That is certain. Probably looking at this other person who's busy doing something else, and they miss what you say. But if there was a video recording of that class and you send it to that person basically did not need, they could go back to the video later and just take their chance. And that made me understand that video is very important. Lately, most schools around me, most of my friends who are teachers as well, I made them imbibe that, and they are thriving in their, actually they are being celebrated in their schools. Because they discover that the thing is this, kids really do not care what kind of video, whether it's an educational video, musical video. The fact that it is a video, we are taking now, it just catch their attention straight. They just give full on attention, and that alone, and that alone just helps you through it, makes it very, very easy. So now I would like to share one more thing. It's something I call fusion method. Now, fusion is fusing what they are used to, their everyday activity, or what they're hyper about, into what you want to teach them. For instance, they love music. You could just, your own free time, search up the latest music they listen to, right? And try to know a few lyrics from it, what's going on. Just try to pitch it in once or twice. It gets their attention, full attention. There are other things, but we have limited time. I wouldn't like to take too long. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Actually, I am honored to be part of this. It is a huge privilege. Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you so much, Kemi. Thank you, HITCH. And thank you, Tech. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adelana. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we'll take some more questions just as we round up. I know it seems like there was a lot of information, and then we'll definitely do a lot more. As Zach mentioned, this is just one webinar in a series of webinars where we're looking to host for educators and for teachers. So we'll have more webinars that do a deeper dive into specialized topics, into those specific topics that Zach mentioned, for example. Yes, so we'll just go to answer more the rest of the questions. If you have any more questions, please share them in the chat. So I'll take one question here that actually addresses something we speak a lot about at HITCH, actually. So the question goes as so it says, essentially, from bio, it says, essentially, HITCH is a curation platform that brings together videos already curated. Yes. And then say context is king. There's a concern on how these foreign videos align with local nuances on the principle of pedagogy. So the question there sounds like how, if the context is missing, how are we dealing with that, or how do we address that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is, thank you so much for the question. So when we launched HITCH back in 2018, I actually came to Nigeria, to Lagos, was there for about a week with our CEO, and then was just like, okay, we're going forward, we're launching the schools. We launched our first 10 schools. But one of the very first things I noticed was that the videos that were currently on the platform were very Western focused. So very either European, American, Canadian focused. And I identified this right off the bat as being a very big problem, that students weren't going to be able to relate to this content. So how did we go about addressing this? Well, there's two real ways that you can kind of address this issue. The one that most people immediately turn to is, I need to create my own content for this. And yes, that is a solution. It certainly is a solution to create your own content and to go ahead and make sure you're filling in those holes. So that's how we started. What we started with was we identified the holes in our platform that needed more contextually relevant videos. So to do this, we started on kind of what we're doing here today. I started meeting with teachers that were interested in producing educational content, providing them with some base level of training, giving them some resources to get started, and then actually identifying those places in the curriculum or in our library that we needed locally created content. So that was the first approach, and that's where most people go to. But as we kind of moved along, we've realized that there's two other ways that you can kind of handle this situation. And it's through by using what is considered scaffolding. So scaffolding in the context of education, or within education technology in particular, is generally referring to the surrounding architecture that the content is being provided in. So I know that's kind of a little bit confusing, but for instance, in our newest project that we're working with on Learn Africa, we're embedding our videos directly into the textbooks. So if the textbooks are there to provide the original context that the student is familiar with, and then you're using a video that is right next to it that maybe doesn't touch exactly on the same indigenous knowledge base. And granted, we would never use a piece of content that was completely foreign to a student. In other words, if it's road safety and we're showing pictures of roads in Washington, D.C., we would just never do that because that just doesn't work for the students. But in the situation where maybe it's just a nondescript road safety traffic, as long as it's at least being positioned directly within a scaffolding or an architecture that the student can relate to, then you're really just engaging critical thinking for that student. So now you're saying, here's the information, here's a video that is a slightly different. It's the same thing of asking a question or doing a sample question in class, and then on the exam, using the same architecture of that question, but maybe just changing the one of the keywords in it or one of the components in it, because the student then has to use critical thinking. So you never want this to be such a contradiction between what the student's seeing in the video versus what they're reading in the textbook. But if it's something that's borderline, it does help to provide the context that way. The final way we actually go about doing this, and we've started doing this now, is we've opened up translation efforts. So we are taking content that was developed using language from Western countries. So in particular, we're partnering with a group called Fuse School, and we're taking their content and we are using our translators to convert it into Hausa and Yoruba. We're starting with Hausa and then we'll be moving to Yoruba. So that way you can actually take an animated video, for instance, that maybe the word choice that they're using, maybe they're using dollar bills in their word choice or whatever they're using. By using the translation, you can actually now contextualize that to what the student would generally hear. And this is great for the primary level students, especially in the North, where still Hausa is the predominant language of teaching. So as long as the students can then process the information. So that is how we have approached it. But again, that doesn't mean that you should take a video that a student will just have no connection to whatsoever. Even if you put it in this architecture, it doesn't still mean that you'll be able to successfully do it. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Zach. Bayo, I hope that answered your question. I don't know if you're still on. So this question, I'm sure there might be a lot of people who have this question. So it says, I teach grade 1 learners that are new to the online system. How do we get them to follow instructions during an activity such as art and craft? And then just, there's that question as well, but I think just to answer the question, as you're answering the question, Zach, also to consider teachers who teach subjects who are not necessarily theory heavy, right? So like arts and craft or any other vocational STEAM subjects, yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a great question. And in fact, I just want to make a slight comment here towards this. There is a large emphasis on creating content for the STEM subjects. And one of the things that we focus on at HITCH is expanding past those STEM subjects. There's so many resources out there dedicated for STEM, but maybe not as many that are dedicated for arts and crafts, for studio art, all of those sorts of things, or visual art, excuse me. So that's one of the areas that we do focus on. Now, when you're looking to create, I guess there's two different components here. So one, if you're looking to create a video that's going to do this with the students, is different from, if you're live interacting in like a Google Classroom sort of situation. But the number one thing is, again, trying to replicate this interactivity as much as possible. In other words, ask questions frequently. If it's a video, it doesn't matter. Just still ask the questions. Get the students to take a pause back and think about whatever you are asking them. For arts and crafts, it's also really helpful to just do a step by, and make it as step-by-step as possible. And sorry, a very key point that we've come across when doing any kind of arts projects: show the finished work first. Get the students excited about what they're creating. So if you have, I don't know, there's like shaving cream foam prints that I know you can do. It sounds like it's going to be a messy or not so fun experiment. And then all of a sudden you show them what the finished product looks like. The students get very excited to do it. And then you just have to be checking in with them. The other thing is, if you're live with them, the conversation doesn't have to be all about the art. The idea is to keep the student engaged. So if you need to be having kind of a more informal conversation with them as they're doing the art and craft, just to keep them engaged with you, that's another approach that you can take. So you can be just asking questions about how their day was as they're doing a certain step of the arts and craft project. And then, when they get to that step, you can see and be like, okay, so now the next thing you'll do is X or Y. So if you're doing it from a video perspective, ask lots of questions, always show the end product so students get excited about it. And then if you're live with them, just be willing to engage just very informally with them as they're going through it. And that's just really keeping them in tune to what's going on the screen or on the online platform.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, if you have any further questions, please share them in the chat as we round up now. As we round up, if no other questions come in, again, if you have, because this is a lot of information and takes a bit to digest, maybe you need to watch it over again when we send the recording. Please don't hesitate to reach out via email with any further questions. So just to kind of get to a closing point, this question is like an overall view. So it's like goes, what are the trends or expectations for EdTech in Africa in the coming years?
Yes, so I think this is a fantastic question. And I think we're at a very important inflection point right now. So in particular, within the EdTech space in Nigeria or sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, the COVID-19 should have been a boon. In other words, it should have been great for adoption rates. It should have been great for getting people on the platform. It should have been great at getting teachers and students more familiar with engaging with digital resources. And it should have been great for companies that were in the space to be able to grow their services. What has happened, though, is it's become a free-for-all. And I'm sure the teachers I've spoken to, all say the same thing. You're being inundated. You have to learn how to use Zoom, Google Classroom, even the HITCH platform. You have to, ULesson, classnotes.ng. You're being brought to all these different places to use all these different resources, all which are being developed independent of one another. It is just too much. There is too much of a individual approach that's going on here. When we talk about content, there are so many companies in Nigeria right now making educational content, and they're making the one company, let's say ULesson makes a video, and then this other company, let's say WitsPrep, will make the exact same video. And now they're both going to they're going to be competing against each other for how to distribute these videos, because neither of them have that part of it. And so instead, you're actually breeding this competition within the EdTech space. And when the end goal here is just completely lost, which is the students at the end of the day, supplying the students and teachers with the resources they need. So what we really, really, really need to see in the EdTech space is this ecosystem approach, this recognition that not one company or not one product or not one service is going to solve these issues. Somebody is going to be having to work on a learning management system that works for offline usage messages for students in Africa. At the same time, somebody else should be developing educational content that can be able to be used on that learning management system. And somebody needs to master a way to deliver this to students who don't have access to the internet. So you need instead this greater cooperation and ecosystem approach to start to emerge. Now, on the plus side, I do believe you are starting to see this to happen. I do believe that people are recognizing that that if I collaborate with somebody who can deliver offline and I'm making videos, rather than try to make all my money off my content, maybe I can do a situation like a revenue share where I'll give them my content, and if they succeed, I succeed. And that's the approach that really needs to be driven home. Enough of this siloization, enough of this isolation. People need to come together, private sector, government, not NGOs. You need to build an entire ecosystem to start approaching this. Now, on the other side of this, I also just want to add one more comment here, and that is the role of the teacher needs to be solidified. So as you look at the EdTech space moving forward, a lot of these EdTech solutions are being created in a vacuum. There is no teacher input from the design, which is why it's really important to us that we had Adelana on this call, because you need that teacher input. You need to understand how teachers are addressing this and what barriers they're running into. So the last part about how I see the trends and the focus of EdTech is where it's opening up to everybody. There's an explicit role for the teachers and students in the design and development process in particular. So that's where, and I hope we're all heading in that direction. We're working to try to build this ecosystem based on education. So hopefully we'll see that trend continue because the alternative, the fractured response is just gonna provide a whole bunch of inequality and inequity to who gets access to which resources, and that doesn't have the outcome that we want.
Thank you so much, Zach. I hope that rounded up things really nicely, and it did for me on this end. Just looking forward and what are the next steps for EdTech and education in Africa and globally. Thank you so much, Zach, and thank you so much, Adelana. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us as we come to a close. We're sharing a survey link in the chat. Please help us. We'd love to hear back from you, hear how this experience was as we put together further webinars for teachers and for educators. Please, the survey link is in the chat again. And if you're looking for how to connect with TechQuest and HITCH for further, to hear about updates on our business and further events, further webinars, we're sharing a link in the chat as well, a Linktree link. If someone from TechQuest can also please maybe share, I know there's a Linktree link as well that has further links within it to our Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms and how you can connect with us. We'll also, of course, share all of these via email if you registered for the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. We're coming to a close now, and I will just pull up the slide we had at the beginning, and I'll just read it out as we come to an end, and saying 2020 was the year that teachers became essential workers, and if we didn't understand the role of teachers prior to 2020 and just how important the role of a teacher is, now we know. We clearly saw the central role teachers play in the lives of families, the nation, and the economy. And now we're in a world where teachers are digital specialists, and that's where we're working to. That's why this webinar series exists. So we're working to help teachers become digital specialists and take up the role they need to take in the society. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We'll be sharing further resources via email. So don't worry. Thank you again. That's everything from us. Thank you. Yeah. So if you would love to keep up or connect with TechQuest, you can. The TechQuest website is actually pretty. It's tqstem.org. Again, if you join maybe a bit late, this webinar is brought to you by HITCH in collaboration with TechQuest STEM Academy. The TechQuest website is tqstem.org. You can also check the chat for social platform links for TechQuest and HITCH. Thank you so much to the TechQuest team for joining us and doing this with us. And thank you to Delano from TechQuest as well for sharing with us. And thank you to Zach from HITCH. For resharing the survey link, please, it should take about at most 2 minutes to complete the survey, just to share feedback and any further questions you might have. Thank you so much.